It's Saturday, May 25th, 2019, and this, whoops, haha, technical difficulty there. Actually, everybody, this is the Pro and Con Show, and I'm Michael James Ott, I'm your host. Obviously I was looking at the websites that review for this show and forgot to switch to the presentation so you could see the title of the show there. So anyway, Pro and Con Show, Saturday, May 25th. So welcome to the show. Not a lot of consistency in the major stories across the 5 different websites, the 5 different sources of news that we normally monitor here on the show. So I wanted to take the opportunity to really just talk about the one in the center of these websites, so National Public Radio, npr.org, and offer that so I've been at this for coming up on a month here, and looking at NPR, and feeling pretty good about how they report the news in a mostly unbiased way. And one of the nice things about them is that they definitely will focus on things that are important, but not necessarily the lead stories for the day. For example, if there's been this ongoing fight between Congress and Mr. Trump over, getting records and so on, if that's been going on for some days on end, NPR will still cover the story, but they'll put it down in their stories, and the top lead story here. So I'm actually just going to talk about NPR and go through some of the things that they're talking about here, and then make sure I touch upon a few things, and specifically about leadership, and how it's affecting the separation of powers. And so the website, and I actually showed it to you earlier by accident. That's what it looks like today. And the lead story actually on NPR is, in rural West Texas, illegal border crossings are routine for U.S. citizens. And if you go into that into that story, it's interesting. So in Mexico, just south of the border, they often have these local clinics, and in Mexico, healthcare is free. If you go to the clinic, you can get basic healthcare for free. And these people, where they live in Texas, it can be, in the story anyway, it says 1.5 to 3 hours, or even longer, for them to negotiate through to a hospital, or to go through to a border crossing and go across the border into Mexico for healthcare. And so there's actually, in this picture here, they show there's a little rope bridge, and just literally several ropes tied between trees, and you can walk on one of the ropes and use the other ropes as handholds, and you can cross back and forth. And the Border Patrol in this area realizes that the local people need to do this for their own, normally for healthcare reasons. And so actually they know about these areas, and they allow this kind of trafficking back and forth across the border, even though it's illegal. There's no law, apparently, against going from the U.S. into Mexico, but there is a law against coming back again without going through one of the official ports. And I've gone to Mexico many times, and for business, of course, gone through the official ports many times, and it's a time-consuming thing to do that. But anyway, the point being, this is a great story to talk about how that border region not anywhere near as simple as some people would want you to believe. Okay. Then you go through, and so the other thing about NPR, which is great, is that you go through here and they have other stories that people won't normally cover, but they're great stories and things we ought to be talking about. So one of the next stories on their website talks about the porn industry and how the availability of porn is widespread on the internet, and that means that people are looking at this on a regular basis, and how the various people are appreciating that, depending on whether they're in the industry, acting in the movies, or watching this, and how it affects them. And so this is, again, you'll hear me talk about we need to step back and look at a lot of things in our lives in a much more holistic way. We need to, in our government, take the time to look at issues, and, for example, porn. That would be a great issue. I've talked about setting aside a few days every month to have a discussion about a specific issue and really understand it fully, as both as representatives in the Congress and in the executive branch, and as citizens, and then talk about what we think is really happening and what we should do about it. If anything, if there's corrective action laws or whatever that need to take place. And then you go through the website further. This is so there's talking about being on a campaign trail and places the candidates can't resist. And so I don't know where this place is. It's called, I don't know actually what it's called, but anyway, it's corn dogs, obviously. And I wish that I was at this place. I'd love to go in there and just see what this thing is. So they have double bacon corn dogs. They have jalapeno corn dogs. They have sweet corn corn dogs, foot-long corn dogs. I think it's hilarious. I would love to give it a try. It'd be fun to do that. And then we keep going through here, and so then we get to some of the other websites they're talking about. Of course, the border funding. So I talked earlier about the first story was about how this is a complicated thing of people crossing back and forth across the border, and building a wall may not be the simplest thing, and for a lot of reasons. And so there's a federal judge that has blocked some of Mr. Trump's efforts to redirect federal funding from other programs using emergency powers, and basically stating that for these emergency powers to be true, these issues that the funding is being redirected for has to be something that's not well known previously. And clearly, Mr. Trump has been talking about, upping the funding of the border walls ever since he got into office, in fact, beforehand. And so there's not some sudden surge of need. This is an ongoing thing. So the judge is at least temporarily blocking the redirecting of a couple $2 billion of funding from other areas. And that gets to the constitutional thing that we have, which is the separation of powers. And so I think most people believe in the Constitution. In this country, you believe in the importance of this balance of power between the judiciary and the representative and the executive. Okay, and on the whole, it's served us extremely well. I mean, given the lack of or the level of apathy for U.S. voters and U.S. people in general, the fact that the government still functions as well as it does is a fantastic thing, and it's all because of these attributes of this three sections of power, three sections of the government, checking each other to make sure that no one section takes too much power from the others. And so this is where, Congress is supposed to appropriate the money. And so you're supposed to convince Congress represents the people, supposed to appropriate the money. And okay, the executive branch can say, well, I'd like this, I'd like that. But in the end, Congress mostly is supposed to appropriate the funds. And this emergency thing is really just supposed to be, well, there's a hurricane or something, or some unforeseen, an earthquake or whatever that devastated an area. Or maybe a massive military attack somewhere unforeseen, or these kinds of things are emergencies. You could have a pandemic, some kind of disease thing, and suddenly you have to fund a bunch of healthcare stuff because some kind of flu was passed from swine or birds or something into the populace, and suddenly millions of people are dying. Well, these are emergencies, but not getting what you want just because of an ongoing debate, and you're losing the debate. So you can't Congress, you can't just redirect funds that Congress has appropriated elsewhere. It should not be correct to do that, because that's not an emergency. And in fact, both houses of Congress, including both political parties, there was a very prominently popular voted thing. They passed a resolution, actually a legislative bill, sent it to the president. Of course, he didn't sign it because he wants to alter the use of these funds. But both houses of Congress, both political parties said, don't do this, this is wrong, and he did it anyway. And I personally am very concerned, I hope you are, with the separation of powers thing, that he's overstepping his ability, which then comes to the leadership thing. And this is an interesting thing that I feel like, my opinion is, okay, here on this program we separate fact, which is who, what, where, and when, from opinion. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about opinion based on observations I've had. It feels like fact to me, but I was in the U.S. Navy and saw all kinds of leadership tactics, and the presidents that we have, and actually the representatives, our government officials generally are failing to lead us. What do I mean by that? Well, these issues are complex, and they come up with whatever policy that they want to bring forward or put forward to address whatever the issue is. Well, that's great, but then the next step is to lead. And leading means that you have to convince people. You have to take the time. You cannot be lazy. You can't sign an executive order and say, well, we're just going to do this. You've got to take the time, take the effort to convince people in general that what you're wanting to do is the appropriate thing. And you lead by convincing people to follow. You don't lead by bashing people that have opposing opinions. You embrace those opposing opinions, and you say, okay, this is the information that you bring to this. This is what I think it means. This is why, given the whole. And I talk again and again and again about the pro and the con, and the good and the bad, and the for and against. It's the whole package of information that allows people to understand the policies, the proposed policies, and whether it makes sense on the whole. And all we're doing these days is, one side is lining up all the arguments for what they want to have happen, and just totally ignoring any of the views or visions of the other side of the argument. And those things are real. They're there. one of the analogies that I use just to, bring this into focus is you want to buy a car, and perhaps a used car, and the transmission, you take it to a mechanic and they identify the transmission is likely to fail. Well, this is, some thousands of dollars of repairs costs, and it's important that you understand that, and it plays a prominent role in what you're going to do when you buy the car and what you think is appropriate to do when you're looking at purchasing the car. Well, these issues, whether it's racism, abortion, immigration, whatever, on and on and on and on and on. The list goes on and on and on. There are pros and cons, good and bad, for and against on all these things, and we all of us citizens, we have to embrace these things. We have to take them into our hearts, open our hearts and our minds to the concept that these things are complex, and rather than try to dumb them down and put them into 4-letter sayings on bumper stickers, no, we need to take the time to understand them, take the time to understand the pro and the con, the good and the bad, the for and against, and then decide rationally and calmly and reasonably what makes sense. And there'll be people that have different views, of course, but on the, as you talk it through and talk it through and talk it through and talk it through, what you will find is people will come to a consensus, and they will follow a leader who is bringing this on, who is taking the time to cause people to understand the issue. And this is, I was visiting with my brother-in-law down in Texas, and we were walking with one of the neighbors, and we were talking about Mr. Trump, and I was talking about, some of the things that he was doing, and my brother-in-law said, well, I think he's doing great, and because he's just doing what he thinks ought to be done, and people are trying to stop him, and he's just doing it anyway, and he's just signing executive orders, and he's doing this and he's doing that. And I was like, yeah, but wait a second. He's not leading. And he's like, yeah, but I worked in the construction industry for many, many years, and these guys, these developers, I work with them all the time, and they're just, hey, get it done. We got to do this. We got to do that. Get it done. This is, no bullshit. Cut out all this crap. We're going to do this. And I said, well, that's great, but those guys were risking their own money and running their own businesses and deciding what to do for them. And so they can be that way. But Mr. Trump, he's running a country for me and you and 340 million other people. And it's not he's not leading, he's directing, and you can't do that. That is not the function of the President of the United States of America. You lead, and the way you lead is by spending the time, expanding the effort, the exhaustive effort, to convince people about, a particular issue, and exhaustively investigating, training, communicating, and then, yes, over time, influencing and stuff like that, but influencing with the facts, the pro and the con, the good and the bad, the for and against, to here's the direction, let's go this way. So, yeah, we're running out of time for today. We just do 15 or 20 minutes, but this, again, is the Pro and Con Show. My name is Michael James Ott. I hope what I say in these shows, both in the past and in the future, causes you to rethink how you participate as a citizen of the United States, as a person very much invested in this institution we call the United States government. And yeah, be open to the for and against, the pro and the con, the good and the bad. And until the next show tomorrow, I hope you have an awesome evening. Bye for now.